All right, this is Chapter 9 Metamorphosis. I spent a lot of time working on my math homework when I got home, but I just couldn't focus on it. I was thinking about Houdini the whole time. He told me he was going to contact me that night, but I didn't know when. The more I thought about texting with Houdini, the more I thought how crazy it all was. Maybe Zeke was right. Maybe Houdini was some kind of imaginary father figure to me. Maybe I was the son he never had. Maybe I was crazy. And then, just before 10 o'clock, bzzz, bzzz, bzzz. Yes! I yanked open the drawer of my night table and grabbed the flip phone. Harry? It said on the screen. It still freaks me out that he just called me Harry. I thought about calling Zeke and telling him to come over to my house right away. It would be great if he could witness one of my tech sessions with Houdini. Then he would know I'm not making it all up. But it would be too risky to call Zeke. I'd have to go downstairs, make the call on our landline, and explain to my mother why I needed to have Zeke come over so late at night. I decided against it. I'm here, I tapped on the keypad. Remember me? Houdini texted. Of course, I tapped. I thought of adding an exclamation point at the end, but I didn't want to let him know how excited I was. Do people remember me? That threw me. He really wanted to be remembered. It seemed important to him. And Houdini was remembered. He's been dead for close to 100 years, but whenever somebody walks by my house and sees the plaque by the front door, they tell me they know who he is. Even little kids know about the great Harry Houdini. He was sort of like Elvis, JFK, and Marilyn Monroe. Everybody knows who they were, even though they've been gone for a long time. Houdini's name had even entered the language. When you say that somebody pulled a Houdini, everybody knows it means he or she escaped from a seemingly inescapable situation. Everybody remembers you. I tapped. A pause, and then, how is life? Okay, I tapped. I thought about asking him, how is death, but that would have been obnoxious. Little by little, we were getting to know each other. It wasn't like Houdini to make small talk. I had a sense that he had a message to deliver, or there was something he wanted me to do for him. But life could be better, right? He texted. I guess, I tapped. Sure, life can always be better. My mom could win the lottery, that would make life better. I could become the center fielder for the Mets, that would make life better. What was he driving at? My screen was blank for a while, and then, what do you want to escape from? Weird question. Was he talking about handcuffs? Jail? Cells? I didn't want to escape from anything. Huh? I tapped. Everybody wants to escape from something, he texted. It's human nature. We are never satisfied with what we have in the present. Man has always dreamed of escaping from where he is presently. Houdini's words kept scrolling up my screen. Freedom and liberty are what America is all about, he said. When I did an escape, it gave people hope. It made them believe they could escape from their dismal lives. I didn't know how to respond. My life wasn't dismal. I was pretty happy, actually. I felt like tapping out, "What's your point?" But again, that would seem obnoxious. There is only one thing I could not escape from, he texted. What was that? I tapped. Death, he texted. I spent my life escaping from death, but when it came for me, there was no way to escape. Now he was creeping me out. I decided not to reply. I'd wait and see what else he had to say. But he didn't text anything more. I stared at the blank screen on my phone. Finally, I couldn't resist responding. Why did you contact me? I finally tapped. There's something that I want to discuss with you, he texted. Aha! It was about time he got to the point. What? I tapped. Metamorphosis. I knew that word. It's a fancy way to say change. I had learned in science class that many animal species in the world go through some sort of metamorphosis during their lifetime. Caterpillars change into butterflies, tadpoles change into frogs. But I also knew that Houdini wasn't talking about metamorphosis of animal species. Metamorphosis was one of Houdini's earliest and most famous tricks. He began performing it with his wife Bess back in 1895. It was a big part of his act for the next 30 years. Here is how it worked. A trunk was hauled out onto the stage. You know what I mean by a trunk, right? It's not a suitcase, it's bigger. The trunk was more than big enough to hold a man. Houdini would open the trunk and climb into a large black flannel sack that was inside. Bess would put heavy tape over Houdini's mouth, then she would tie Houdini's hand behind his back with ropes. Bess would make a knot in the top of the sack and seal it with wax. Then she would close the trunk's lid. Then she would lock the trunk with 6 padlocks. Finally, she would wrap a rope around it and knot it tightly. Simply escaping from the trunk would have been pretty remarkable, but what Houdini did was even more amazing. Bess would wheel out a large curtain and place it in front of the trunk so the audience couldn't see it anymore. Then she would climb on top of the trunk and clap her hands 3 times. On the 3rd clap, the curtain would open, and instead of Bess standing on top of the trunk, it was Houdini. To completely blow the audience's mind, Houdini would then jump down off the trunk and remove the rope, unlock the padlocks, and open the lid. Out popped Bess from inside the flannel sack, with the knot and seal unbroken. How did they do it? Audiences were so stunned by metamorphosis that many times they didn't even applaud. It was sort of like when Houdini was locked in a trunk and thrown into a river. Nobody could explain how he escaped. The only logical explanation, and some people believed this, was that Harry and Bess had found a way to deconstruct the atoms of their bodies so they could switch places. The most amazing thing about metamorphosis is not that the Houdinis did it, but how fast they did it. The whole trick seemed to take just 3 seconds. One moment Bess was standing on top of the trunk, with Houdini locked inside it, and a few seconds later, Houdini was standing on top of the trunk with Bess locked inside the sack. I had watched a bunch of magicians duplicate metamorphosis on YouTube. You can watch them yourself, but I could never figure out how they pulled it off. Obviously it was a trick, but how was it done? How did they make the switch at all? How did they do it so fast? The trunk was padlocked and bound with ropes. What was the secret to metamorphosis? I tapped. Simple, Houdini replied. The box had a rear panel that opened inward, so I'd climb out of the box while Bess was talking, and then Bess would climb in. Smart. If the panel opened in, it wouldn't affect the ropes that were wrapped around the trunk. But how did you get out of the sack and get Bess into it? So fast, I tapped. There was a slit in the bottom of the sack, he replied. I would climb out while Bess was locking the trunk, and she would climb in while I was unlocking it. The timing had to be perfect. But what about the clapping, I asked. Bess clapped her hands 3 times, and then instantly she was in the box. That wasn't Bess clapping, Houdini texted. It was me. Bess was already in the trunk by then. Of course! Once you knew how a trick worked, it seemed so obvious. I slapped my forehead. But what did metamorphosis have to do with me? I wasn't going to go on stage and get locked inside a trunk. I was about to tap in words to that effect when Houdini sent me another text. How would you like to do a metamorphosis? What? I couldn't imagine what he had in mind. That's impossible, I tapped. We exist in different centuries. Nothing is impossible, Houdini tapped right back. You should know that by now. Yeah, nothing is impossible for him. For an average person, it sometimes seemed impossible to escape from problems in his or her life. But Houdini could escape from anything. If he could escape from handcuffs and jail cells and padlocked trunks, maybe it made people believe they could escape from whatever was confining them. Poverty, depression, disease, nothing was impossible. I was finally beginning to put 2 and 2 together. Are you saying you want to switch places with me? I tapped. Yes. Aha! At last I understood the real reason why Houdini had contacted me. It seemed crazy, but he wanted to help me get out of the only thing he could never escape from. He wanted to escape his own death. I don't think that's such a good idea, I tapped. Why not? He texted. You can bring me back. I died young. I want to be alive again. This was getting scary. I wanted to help the guy, but what if I did and Houdini was alive again? Would that be legal? What if I changed history for the worse? I was beginning to regret that I had ever communicated with Houdini in the first place. I didn't know what to do. I am desperate, he texted back. I have to go, I tapped. Don't, he texted. Stop, don't leave me here. He was freaking me out. Instinctively, I snapped the flip phone shut and hung up on him. I didn't want to deal with this right now, but a few seconds later, bzz, bzz, bzz. He wasn't going to give up. I thought about ignoring the text. What could he do? Come and get me? Make me disappear like he famously did with an elephant in 1918? Bzz, bzz, bzz. Against my better judgment, I opened the phone again. We must have had a bad connection, he texted. So let me get this straight, I tapped. You get to come to the 21st century, and what, I get to be dead? That doesn't sound like much fun to me. No, he replied. You don't get to be dead, you get to be me. Huh? I finally tapped, after looking at the phone for a long time. Don't you want to be the most famous man in the world? I'm not sure. That was the truth. I've often thought it would be cool to be a famous celebrity, but then it would be a drag to have people following me around and asking me to sign autographs and stuff all the time. Who needs that aggravation? It would just be temporary, Houdini texted. How long? I tapped. 1 hour. So you would be in my century for 1 hour, and I would be in your century for 1 hour? Exactly, he texted. I can make that happen. 1 hour. That didn't seem very long. It could be fun. That is, if he could pull it off. How do you do that? I tapped. Through metamorphosis, remember? I am Houdini, remember? It sounded like a lot of crap to me. How could he possibly send himself to my time and send me to his? But then, how was he texting me in the first place? It was like magic. He was a magician after all. Nothing was impossible. When? I tapped. There is no time like the present, he texted. Give me a minute, I tapped. I needed to think things over. If we did a metamorphosis right now, I would just be gone for an hour, then I'd be back. My mother would never know I was gone. Nobody would know. I could just get up in the morning and go to school like nothing happens. It could be cool. I'd have a memory to last a lifetime. What do I have to do? I tapped. Nothing, he texted. Hang up, lie down, leave the rest to me. Okay, I tapped. I trust you. Goodbye. Thank you, he texted. Why was I trusting him? I asked myself. I didn't know this guy. Oh, what difference did it make? He probably can't do it anyway. What did I have to lose? I closed the phone and put it back in the drawer. This was it. I couldn't believe I was actually going to do it. It was risky, I knew. Maybe I would regret it. But my mom always told me, you've got to take some risks in life if you want to get anywhere. You'll never remember all the times you played it safe and everything worked out fine. What you'll remember will be the times you took a risk and something good happened. I lay down on my back and closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. Nothing happened. Not at first. Maybe nothing was going to happen. Maybe Houdini didn't know how to do metamorphosis after all. And then I noticed a rumbling. An earthquake? My bed wasn't shaking. I was. It was very gentle at first, and gradually it became more powerful. It didn't hurt. It was sort of like one of those coin-operated vibrating chairs they have in airports and furniture stores. I wanted to open my eyes to see what was happening to me, but I didn't dare. I didn't want to mess things up. It felt like the room was spinning. And then I was gone. End of the chapter.